Today I talk about overcoming rage, improving reaction time, and sport psychology. Welcome to Ask Weldon episode 74, the living room edition and the headset edition because my mic is somewhere and this is just more comfortable, and I thought I would try to enjoy my ice cream while I was doing the show, so I wanted a nice headset to free my hands up. Okay, so updates. I just got off two very interesting phone calls. Lots of news to update on that. Can't tell you about it right now. Totally on the DL. Uh, so that was a big announcement, I'm sure. Everybody's really excited now. What else is new? Here we go. 4 days in a row, consistent release. I'm back on track, everybody. Probably not going to do the weekends still because still no daycare on the weekends. Makes it hard to do it with kids running around. But really excited to see how things shake up with all the teams training in Korea. And the brackets for e-turners, or like Turner Broadcasting's like E-League, were just announced for the groups for the next CS:GO tournament. So that is kind of exciting. I get to see my favorite team, CLG, face off against C9, supposedly. Kind of depressed about that, but whatever. What else? Nothing much new. Let's get into the show.
Anonymous asks, how do I increase my reaction time other than by using supplements?
Reaction time is more or less genetic, and it's more or less the same as everybody else, maybe slightly faster, slightly slower, and then you increase your reaction time, like actual reaction time in milliseconds, by using the correct amount of fats balanced in your body. So we eat a lot of like too thick fats, the animal type, and you need more of the plant type fat, so like omega-3s that come from fish, because fish eat a bunch of algae and condense it for you, or from cow butter from cows that actually eat grass, not the kind that just eat feed, or from like rapeseed oil, things like that. So that allows your brain to myelinate the neurons in a more effective way and repair the damage. The myelination constantly accrues damage, is constantly being rejuvenated, and that's basically what decides your reaction speed. Because if you just tried to think, move my hand, it would take maybe a half second or a second to like actually do it. But the neuron charge travels very rapidly because it skips every part of the neuron that's myelinated with this fat. So you want it to be nice and healthy and transmit the current from one gate to the next gate like really well. Transmit isn't really the right word, but it helps it skip gates. So there's that. Now, the rest of it is a system that is trained. So you have your reaction speed, which is hard-coded, and that's more or less the same for everybody, kind of. A little bit faster, slower, depends on diet and like degenerative diseases and a little bit on genetics. And then I guess maybe all of that is genetics, technically. But then, or epigenetics. But then you have the actual like visual programming. So like I have the same reaction speed as Soren, let's say, if we just did a reaction speed test. Bjergsen, or like I don't know, Simple. But then if you test our reaction to a certain visual stimuli, you would notice that his is way faster. But if you test my reaction to the starting sound of a swim race gun, mine would be much faster. So you can increase your reaction speed through training intentionally training what you react to visually. So what you want to do is try to predict the thing that you want to start to react to and visualize what you're going to be looking for, and then go in and train that over and over again. It's useful if you can use a sandbox mode in some sort of drill, and you can like wait for it, and then like it comes at a random interval and you have to react to it every time, and you can start picking up cues and train it through volume repetition over and over again. If you're unfortunately playing a game like League of Legends, which doesn't have that style of sandbox mode. Dota, I think you can do it, but in League of Legends you can't. And so then you have to kind of go into the matchup and think like, okay, in this matchup, what is something that I could train and visualize it and get ready for it and predict it and then try to react to it. And that's how you speed up that programming, the software of the reaction speed. Then the hardware, like I said, you take care of through um, mostly through diet and then also through focus training. So they found that the reaction speed for people starting a sprint was much more accurate and faster if they did like mindfulness and focus training beforehand, if they were prepared and if they set other variables like outside of their mind, just said, okay, I'm going to focus on what I'm doing here. And if they didn't have a lot of cognitive load previously in the day. So if they came at the race fresh or rejuvenated. Whereas people who had a lot of cognitive load earlier in the day and kind of used up their attention, or people who didn't go through any like pre-race intervention for focus, their reaction speed to the gun was either much slower or much too early. So like the reaction speed is either was closer to right on the dot, or it was like out here in variable positions, like starting too early, starting too late. Um, so yeah, that's how you increase reaction speed, and it starts to degrade biologically. Uh, I think basically the science is more or less concluding around the ages of late 30s. Um, but then if you have a good diet and healthy retinue, it can go to late 40s. And then if you specifically train that reaction, then you can sustain it up until it starts to actually degrade in the um, late 50s. So you can like they had people who basically had like they measured slower reaction speed and then they had them train the thing over and over and over again and realize their reaction speed like would recoup to what it should be like at a younger age. So you can like you can more or less sustain it until the brain actually starts kind of degrading badly, and the body starts degrading like badly. But a lot of these reaction speed things were tested with sports and gross motor movement. So then like muscle decay has a big part of that because your muscles start decaying after age 26 or 27. They start becoming inefficient compared to like leading up to 26 or 27. So technically, like your gross motor speed is going to slow down, which is going to slow down reaction speed. But in esport, like that doesn't matter as much because you're moving your finger like that or you're moving your arm like that. So it doesn't matter if your muscle's huge or not. But you should have bigger muscles as you get older. You should like work on that because they're less efficient. So you just need more to like have the same kind of speed, instant acceleration. So yes, thanks for the question. This is not the diet you should have for reaction speed at all. Mm.
David asks, how exactly did you become an esports psychology trainer? I can see the growth in esports, however, it's clearly lacking people like you.
If by that you mean lacking people like me because there's nobody else, that's not partially true because there's a ton of people who want to do the job. But if you mean nobody's hiring anybody else, that might be true because people aren't marketing themselves very well. Or maybe it's selling themselves very well. I'm not sure. So, how did you do it? Well, first, I did sport my whole life, and then I became a coach for a couple of years, and then I went and got coach training. Actually, I've been training more or less coach training or referee training or some sort of training since I was like in my teens. But then I went to get my master's degree in sports psychology and coaching, and then I graduated from that, and I started coaching in soccer and um, swimming, and I focused on elite sport and then some teen level sport, and then youth development coaching for youth development, and then I started watching esport, and I saw that there was a big like need for the kind of coaching expertise in esport and like mental preparation and the kind of stuff sports psychology brings. So I started a blog and a brand, and I started working for free for 2 years. And then about 2 years later, I made my first $135. Thank you, Enemy Esport. And that was like my first, you know, time being paid to be an esports psychology trainer, and I focused on the coaching and training their coaches and training the players in esports in sports psychology. And yeah, and then after that, I just worked on my sales and marketing. So it was 99% It was like 100% training and knowing what the heck I'm talking about so that I can actually make people better at what they do. And then after that, it was 100% sales and marketing. And then once I could get in front of people and then they felt the impact of like playing better and winning more, then they were like, oh, so then they would hire me again and recommend me to other people. Then I just did more sales and more marketing. So that's how I got into it. And if you want to get into coaching, you should check out lowell-coaching.com where you have the opportunity to train other people, like personal train. And then if you are interested in sports coaching, you should check out esportcoaching.net, which is our network for esport coaching. And that includes like performance coaching and lifestyle coaching and nutrition coaching, and we're going to try to cover everything. So thank you for that question, David.
Andy asks, I have a rage problem. I've lost 4 counts due to toxic behavior. I also tilt easily. What are some ways I can overcome this problem?
Okay, Andy. This is hard and easy. Incredibly, sorry, let me dial back. It's very simple, but not easy. And I'm sorry for your lost accounts. And um, I want to say it's too bad that you didn't learn from that, but obviously you did because now you're here asking me how to overcome it. So maybe you're at a point of change. They say in behavior change, you have this position where it's like not thinking you need to change. Then you get to the point where like you realize there's a problem, and then you get to the point where you're like actively planning to change, and then you get to the point where you're actively changing. So planning to change, actively changing. Then you get to the point where you're trying to like sustain that, and then maintenance. So you could be at the point where you're like, okay, you're past the oblivious part where you're like, I don't have a problem. You're like the point where like, wow, I'm aware that I have a problem, but I don't care. Now you're at the point where like, okay, I'm planning to do something. I'm planning to change. I'm planning to like improve my performance, my life, my mindset, everything. And then after this, you're gonna take my advice and like get better. So at the game and also at being toxic. So where does this start? It starts in a couple places. I would start with your focus. Understand that focusing on things you cannot control leads to lower performance and also frustration because a lot of the frustration comes from things you can't control. So recognize what you do have control over. You have control over your actions and your behavior. You do not have control over your emotions. You cannot control the emotions that are stimulated in you. You can feel the rage. You can feel the anger. You can control your behavior. You cannot control the emotions that are triggered. So it's really important to allow yourself to be pissed off and frustrated and super angry and toxic inside, and like maybe even think really frustrating things, but then realize that where does the control factor in? Where does the humanity factor in? So like if you're looking at like fish, like the connection between their emotional response and their behavior is pretty direct. But if you're looking at like humans, we have this stopgap where we can say like, oh, I'm not going to shoot you or whatever. So we have this very nice control. A lot of that is built into society, which we lose when we go online and become anonymous. So like the things that hold us back from doing some of these things are like not there anymore. So you have to kind of like develop them within yourself and realize why you want to act the way you want to act for your own values. What is it that you value? So like in society we have propriety and like certain behaviors that are seen as like unsocial that like we don't do because we don't want to embarrass ourselves or there's some sort of social penalty for it. So when you're on your own and there's no repercussions for your actions, you have to think like, what is it that I value? What is it the kind of person that I want to be, and what like how do I want to be remembered? Like in 50 in like 100 years when your kids and your grandkids are like standing at your grave and looking at what's written there, like what is the sentences used to describe the kind of person that you were to other people, the kind of person that you were to them, to your family, to society? What did you bring to the world? And so you think like, what is it that I really value? Like what kind of person do I respect and look up to? And you say, what are the components of their actions that I respect and that I like and that I value? And realize that those don't start from internally. Those aren't defined by how you feel and how you react like emotionally to the world. Those are defined by how you then act within the world, by the actions that you take, the behaviors you do. So, and those are by choice. Like some days they're really freaking hard, some days they're really easy, but it's always a choice that you have. Um, So then you start layering them up. You start building them up. You say, okay, what is it? What is the thing I have to do? So how do I make that easier? Well, there's two ways you can go about this mental gymnastics. The first is like, well, do it anyway. Like, I feel like crap and I act this way. I feel like great and I act this way. I feel like crap and I act the same way. Whatever. It doesn't change. The second is say like, okay, well, I need to kind of like find ways of relaxing my emotions and calming so that it's easier to react the way that I want to act in like behaviorally. So that then is like to allow uh, basically, are you trying to hack your brain and your emotions and like change them, or are you trying to just assume control over yourself and ignore the fact that you need to hack your brain because you actually don't. You can actually just be mentally tough enough to not need to do that at all. So once you've decided on a path, then if you're on the hacking path where you're like, I want to hack my emotions and try to become more calm so that like it's easier to act the way that I value, then you're going to start on the path of like coping mechanisms, trying to like maybe do those like Chinese stress balls, like self-talk, maybe a little like mindfulness meditation, like pre-preparation, finding ways of like getting frustrated. Like I know streamers that will like like rage and be toxic on stream, but never do anything in the game. Just be very polite in the game, so they have another outlet, and they have a community that they like kind of nest with or like let it out with together. But then they don't, so they don't let it out on their teammates, or their opponents or whatever. So that can be one mechanism. And then if you go the route of like self-control, where you're like, no, I can master this, then you're getting into like the super kind of like Buddhist kind of thinking, where it's basically like, how do you master yourself and your urges? Like, what are they? So you start breaking them apart, and you're like, what is this serving to me when I get pissed off and then I say this thing to this person? What is the end goal? What is the ambition? It's a transaction, right? So how does the math work out? Well, I have this emotional state and he is oblivious to it, and I want to share my pain with him so that he's aware of that, so that I feel better. So I'm transacting a little bit of like comfort from the situation, and then he's transacting some of my discomfort, and so that's what I'm like forcing on him in order to make myself feel better. And you start to do the math on these transactions, and you realize 99.99999% of them are pure selfish. We do them for our own purposes and nothing else. They don't bring any benefit to other people. They're only to salve our own wounds, and not even real wounds, but fake wounds, like emotional wounds. I don't mean fake, I mean emotional wounds, things you can't see, like cut your hand. So then you start rationalizing through your transactions, and you realize, okay, so maybe that transaction doesn't need to occur. Maybe I can find another way of transacting my emotions out without trying to put them onto that person in compensation for my feeling better, or vice versa. Because actually, it doesn't even work, does it? Really, it doesn't help you feel better. So then after you've decided that hacking route, where you like use a bunch of coping mechanisms, or the self-control route, where you decide to like really analyze and become self-aware of these transactions and like stop them, then you can do the moving on part, which is you bring your focus back after the situation, after you've kind of coped with it a little bit, couple seconds. We want to go from like 40 seconds of like distraction and annoyance down to 10 seconds, down to 2 seconds, and the quicker you can move on from that, the faster you can get to performance. So basically, you're like bringing your focus away from the past, from the thing that frustrated you, and back into the present, to the place where performance happens. You bring your focus away from the self, where all the pain and frustration is, and onto the task, where performance happens. It doesn't happen in here, it happens here in your fingers in the game where you're focused. And then you also get non-judgmental. Things don't happen and they're good or they're bad. Things just happen and they are. And then from that point, you have to cope with it. So like, okay, that happened. Now I have to win. So what are the steps to winning from this point? Okay, there's a lot more steps. So I need to start focusing harder and getting there. So that's basically like the fundamental kind of grounding for how to move out of toxicity and frustration and anger and rage into success. And you have to understand that like that's never really going to go away. Like we're human, so the frustration and rage is always like an emotional component of who we are. And a lot of times it's the thing that drives people to have higher performance. The fact that you have like maximum mm, kind of emotional response means that you can use that as fuel for the fire. But you want to use it as fuel for the correct fire, not the incorrect fire. And so the correct fire is to drive your focus back away from past self judgment towards task, present non-judgmental. And if you can use that fuel for the correct kind of focus, then your performance goes up, your emotional impact on other people goes down, and you're generally happier because you're out of it in like a short amount of time and you've moved on to do something even better in the next few seconds. So that is my answer. I hope that it wasn't too long, and thanks for listening, everybody who stayed through that. All of you non-ragers out there who didn't need any advice or who don't understand the pain that Andy and I feel dealing with our rage with fellow players. I know this answer so well because I had to live through it myself. Okay, so then, question of the day. What is your way of dealing with frustration and anger and rage when you are playing? Please help me help Andy fill in the gaps between the lines that I left in like how it is that you actually like deal with anger and frustration when you're playing. What are the mechanisms you use? Are you hacking yourself? Are you going the like rationalization self-control route? Do you just not do it even though you feel it? What do you do? Let us know. And I will see you guys tomorrow.